Alan, I want to rip up the script here. David Leonhardt, his new upshot in the New York Times, they talk about the American middle class. Is as ugly as the New York Times says it is?
Yeah, I think that it probably can't be described ugly enough. Wow. The middle class has been disappearing for decades in the U.S. If you look at wage growth by decade, it's consistently slowed every decade. But a big credit expansion kept the middle class alive until the financial crisis, and we decided to pay down debt. Cards. Right, and we decided to start paying down debt after the financial crisis instead of accumulating debt. Now, specifically in the article, they target income, so you would think that's wage and salary growth, right? And the middle class and lower income groups that he's talking about rely almost solely on wage and salary income, and that's tied to the very weak labor market and wage growth that has been fairly stagnant.
Unlike Vince Reinhart, you didn't show up with 300 pages of note. I don't want to pin you down on this, but how does Ellen Zentner define middle class?
Well, middle class, of course, in the U.S. is a family of four making around $40,000 a year. By New York standards, that doesn't sound like middle class, but when you go outside of the tiny island that we live on, that you can make a fairly good living for a family of four. Unfortunately, other costs and costs of living have gone up where incomes have not. And so after downturns especially, you feel much more pinched, and especially when wage growth is barely keeping a pace with inflation.
You know, middle-class incomes in Canada were behind the United States in 2000, but they now appear to be higher than in the United States. What is Canada doing right?
Well, I think Canada is one of those countries that didn't quite experience the global financial crisis, at least to the magnitude that other countries did. That's not to say that they won't have their own sort of correction at some point. You've got a lot of concerns around, is there a housing market bubble in some areas of Canada, and there's credit expansion there. But they've got a stronger labor market that's closer to full employment than we are here in the U.S., and they didn't suffer the huge downturn.
You know what's curious? I mean, Canada banks had the problem with real estate back in the late 80s, early 90s. They fixed it. We're actually about 10, 15 years behind them.